Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second short-term rental workshop. Before we get started, I'd like to make sure we recognize Mayor Terry Johnston, Commissioner Jimmy Weekly, Commissioner Sam Kaufman, and our newly elected Commissioner Lisette Carey. So thank you all for being here, and good job. And on Zoom, I have Commissioner Mary Lou Hoover, and if Commissioner Clayton Lopez is there, welcome as well. So thank you all again for attending. It's a good crowd. We hope to accomplish a few things tonight. I believe our purpose of tonight is to get your perspective on the short-term rental ordinance. We're going to have some questions about that, I'm sure, to hear from you your thoughts and what we can do better. We have an overview, and I'm going to let Katie go through that. But before we get started, how many renters do we have in the room? If you rent.
Meaning we pay rent, or we...
You don't own a home, but you rent your house. Okay. How many business owners do we have in the room? And how many realtors do we have in the room? Okay, so we have a mix, Katie. So I thank you for your time. We're going to get started here in a few minutes, and I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and she'll go do an overview. So you do have mics at certain areas. What I want you to make sure you do is state your name and where you're from, so that if we need to get back in touch with you, we'll have that information. Speak into the mic clearly so everyone can hear on Zoom. We do have probably 15 people on Zoom at this point in time. So thank you very much.
Again, thanks everybody for coming. I'm Katie Haller, and I'm the director of the planning department here, and we've got staff from several departments who are going to help us keep the meeting moving. First of all, we're going to hear from some of our chief licensing official and maybe our director of code compliance. They're going to give a couple updates on some work that the city is doing related to short-term rentals. And then because we have folks on Zoom and we didn't want them to have to sit quietly during the small group discussions, we're going to switch up the meeting, the format a little bit on you, and try to plow through all these bulleted items all together as a big group. One of the important things to make that work is that if you've heard maybe twice your comments mentioned, say, I agree with just what was just written, and then move on to another thing. We're doing this a little bit differently than the last short-term rental workshop we had, which was just everybody in the room 3 minutes, and we're hoping that a little bit more discussion about some of these topics might help our elected officials, get a better sense of, solutions and opinions that you have. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Amanda or Jim to chat about the software a little bit, wherever you are. You want this one, Jim, or do you want that one?
Hello, my name is Jim Young. I'm the Director of Code Compliance. I'm going to be very brief. The city has been exploring some software programs to assist us in our investigations of short-term vacation rentals. And we are very close to going with a company. We have one more presentation. Myself, along with Amanda Brady, and the transient investigator Sophie Doctoche went up to the city of Marathon last week and saw one of their programs, and we were very impressed with it. And I think this program will also be very important and helpful if this ordinance passes. So that's my spiel. Amanda?
Jim. Good evening, everybody. I'm Amanda Brady, the Chief Licensing Official. I just wanted to discuss or clarify a little bit about the fee that is suggested in the current ordinance. everybody as of right now that holds a non-transient license pays a business tax of $22.05. The regulatory fee that's discussed in the ordinance is a fee that the city will create based on what it costs to regulate this activity. So that will include anything from the employees that are required to cover this enforcement, the enforcement software that we're looking into, and also inspections, to name a few things. But just wanted to clarify on that fee and how that's set. Is there any questions about that fee at this time?
What is it? How much is the fee?
In the ordinance right now, it states $300 a year. That's an annual fee. Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So once you have that enforcement staff enhanced, can you use that to enforce your existing other regulations like illegal transient rentals?
We have separate staff for transient. Transient is a separate fee, a separate license. This will be separate staff for short-term rentals, which will be for a duration of the month up to 6 months. Any other questions? Yes. Software helps track all advertisements from all different platforms to see what addresses match in our municipality, and then we'll match those to our records and see which ones slip through the cracks for us so that code compliance can follow through with that. Yes.
Is there a proposed fee for transient rentals, or how are those going to be governed under this proposal?
Transient rentals are separate. They already have their set fees, so they pay a business tax of $30.87, and then they pay their regulatory fee of $300 per unit.
I'm a little confused because in the paper, what this, I'm sorry, Brenda Donnelly, I own Historic Key West Vacation Rentals, and I'm also a real estate agent, and I also own property here in Key West. People keep referring to transient, so it's very confusing because the first person said transient and software, but you're not talking about transient software. You're not talking about regulating the illegal transients, which are a huge problem here. And the illegal transients don't get a license, so there's no way to track them. They're just doing it. So what you're talking about is a 6 month monthly rental tracking program. Is that what it is? Because it's very confusing when people keep using the word transient, and in the paper today it said transient. Monthlies are not transient.
You're correct. The city start to explore a program for the transient, the 30-day or less violations. Then this ordinance was proposed. In our investigation or looking at these different companies, we found that we could also utilize this program to assist us in this short-term rental ordinance. I know it's very confusing. You have transient, short-term rental, and then non-transient. Non-transient would be the rental of a property for 30 days or longer, or, annually. Short-term would be this proposed ordinance, which is from 30 days to 6 months. Transient is anything less than 30 days. So this program that we initially started to look at to do the transient, we can also utilize it if this ordinance is implemented. Does that clear it up?
Yeah, I just don't understand why you're not implementing the illegal transients, which, sorry, I don't know why you're not implementing the illegal transients, which are a big problem. And, our monthlies are usually not a problem. And when they are a problem, I don't know about everybody else, but I do know about the people that are around me that own vacation rental companies. 90% of them, we have a no nonsense policy. And if there's a problem with my rentals, and somebody's called about noise or anything like that, they're evicted immediately with no refund. So I'm trying to figure out why you're not, why you have or looking into a transient program, which I think is a great idea, and you know, and then now all of a sudden you're going to turn it into the month to 6 months without even trying it on the transient.
Well, we're going to
Problem.
try it on the transits first, but if this ordinance passes, then we'll be utilizing it for this ordinance too. What these programs do is they do a search of over 200 internet platforms for rental advertisements. And then they do a daily report of everything that's being advertised, and then they submit that back to the city. We provide them with a list of all our legal transient and non-transient, and then we compare which ones would be in violation.
I think it's a great idea for transients. I think it's going to be super hard to regulate a 1 to 6 month rental. And it sounds like by saying that you're getting this, and I'm not being argumentative, I'm just trying to understand. By purchasing this for a 1 to 6 month rental, it sounds like you've already decided that this is happening.
We're not purchasing it for that purpose. What we're purchasing it for is to help us with the, like you stated, the transient, the vacation rentals that are a problem. And I did a comparison, fiscal year of 21 to 22, we had 81 transient investigations. We had a code officer initiate a program on our own to start looking at transient or non-transient long-term rentals, and she issued how many? 135 violations, which is telling us that the problem really isn't the vacation rentals at this point. It's the rentals between 30 days and 6 months, or sometimes even longer.
And after we hear a few more questions, let's go ahead, Jason, and get some, if there's any questions for Amanda or Jim on Zoom, because we know we have a lot of folks.
Katie, I do have one person on Zoom. Donna
Stephen
Wendell.
Nikela, I'm a business owner down here. I'm just curious, I have a couple questions and comments, but I'm just curious as to what are the nature of the 136 violations on the short-term rentals that you guys got?
They were long-term rentals.
Long-term rentals. With the
Those were
1 to 6
people.
months.
Those were people renting longer than 30 days.
More than 30 days. And what was the
And
nature?
the majority of them they were renting yearly.
So what kind of violations? What was the violations that were brought back? Like
They didn't have a license.
So it was more of a license issue. That's typical. Okay. So it seems to me that at the crux of this ordinance, it's really saying, well, this is about enforcement. My concern is the why. Why are we making things? Why are we adding more layers of legislation to an issue that I believe is a property rights issue? And personally, I believe that this is a property rights issue. I think people should be able to do with their property whatever they see fit, as long as they aren't hurting anybody else. And I did see in the whereas of this ordinance, it mentions that these 1 to 6 month rentals affect the peaceful enjoyment of property owned and or occupied by longer term and permanent residents. I don't see any evidence for that, quite frankly. I also see it says that this ordinance would promote the health, safety, and welfare of long-term and permanent residents, which I'm curious about. As a business owner, getting in the meat and potatoes of this, I am curious as to what the ordinance means by moving these short-term rentals to denser, commercially oriented zoning districts that permit transient rentals to the city. What areas might those be? And also, what types of complaints or concerns has the city gotten that they believe that these types of rentals affect the peace and enjoyment of property owners that are here long-term?
Well, I would like to defer that to one of the commissioners who is sponsoring this ordinance. I believe the whole crux of this is to try and get a handle on the lack of affordable housing.
But I got a comment about that. You're forcing the long-term homeowners to solve the problem. Like, I live in my house 7 months of the year. The other 5 months, I'm not going to be renting it to long-term local, but now I'm not going to be able to rent it at all unless I go through all of these things. And I would just have to charge more. I think of visiting nurses, somebody relocating, somebody being temporary. I would rent to a local that way, but I'm never renting long-term. But you expect me and my neighbors, which I talked to, that all bought houses when you could still buy them for $300, to take on the housing problem.
I don't believe we're trying to make anybody. I think what we're trying to do is a group effort of solving our housing problem. The city working with the property owners.
So just so that we try to cover as much as we can, one of the questions here in the bullets on the agenda that you'll see kind of speaks to what was just brought up, whether there should be, it's a second bullet, should homesteaded properties be exempt from the provisions of the ordinance? So what I would suggest is let's try to ask any remaining questions in the audience or on Zoom of Amanda or Jim now on the fees or the software, and then let's move on to these questions. The reason being that at least some of our elected officials are expecting to see this ordinance December 6th, and so they want to hear what the public comments are related to
You're
that.
talking about giving this to homesteaded properties. They will lose their homestead exemption if they turn into rentals.
That's not true. You can rent a homesteaded property for 6 months. Doesn't have to be consecutive. In 1 year. The following year, you cannot rent it for 1 day. And you have to occupy your homesteaded property the 1st of January of every year.
The Monroe County told me you could rent 1 month during a year, and not 2 consecutive years like December and not 2 consecutive months like December and January. They said you can rent your home without losing your homestead exemption for 1 month each year.
Well, unless that's changed, Suzanne, I used to work for the property appraiser and the homestead exemption
Maybe they told me
department,
wrong,
so.
but I know someone that lost their homestead exemption under that rule.
So
Questions here about the software or the fees, or on Zoom? Are there hands up on Zoom, Jason?
Yes, we have a Donna Windle on Zoom if she would like to say something.
Go ahead, Donna.
Yes, I would. I think we have a much bigger problem than we're discussing in this room. In 1977, I moved to Fort Myers. I went downtown, I believe it was a Chamber of Commerce office, and I said, I'd like to know about the demographic makeup of this community. They handed me a book that was about 3 or 4 inches thick. And in that book, it said that this number of people live here, this many of people will be moving here in the coming year and other years later. They will be working at this job and this job. They will be getting paid this and this. We will need this number of housing in this price range and this price range to satisfy their needs. And all the information was there. Right now, we're doing a heck of a job of just shooting in the dark. We don't know, we know median, we know what the census tells us. That's obvious and it's right in front of us. But all we really go by is median. We don't really know how many of the 83% of our properties that are non-homesteaded, are they rented long-term? Are they rented short-term? Are they rented 3 months, 6 months, 8 months? We really don't have an inventory to even look at. We know we have a lot of people that need affordable housing. There's no doubt about that. But we just don't know, we don't know how many of them there are either. And I know we've spent many millions of dollars, and I know this is a county issue and not a city issue, excuse me, but we have spent billions of dollars probably at this stage of the game in trying to do everything right for the tourists with the TDC, instead of focusing on what do we need to do right within this community. And I think that's where the bigger problem lies. And we can get a good handle on things. And to their credit, the current sitting commission has created numerous affordable units. And I'm really happy about that because it's taken a long time to get the right group with the political will that it takes. But I think the next political will has to be to get something like Most every other county in Florida has a Department of Economic Opportunity or Economic Development or something like that. We need that desperately here.
If I can, just a few things. One, I did want to see if I can get an answer on what kind of commercial dense areas that these units would be better sought in. According to the ordinance, it mentioned something about this. So where exactly is that? I do believe in the need for mixed-use commercial residential like we do have downtown. I think in the Newtown commercial areas there is opportunity on that. I hope that's something that code enforcement could perhaps look into. I also am a believer in perhaps looking at accessory dwellings as another option, which I believe the city is looking into, and perhaps even some less strict height restrictions in certain areas to have some additional building for residential. Another thing I wanted to mention too is under the provision it mentions property medallion prominently on the outside of the unit to alert the public of the rental use, which I find a bit strange. And if we're getting into the idea of property medallions and trading like a liquor license, I do just want to remind the city that Key West was known for a long time as the most corrupt taxi medallion system in America. I really hope this doesn't turn into a medallion system, which I know is in the proofs for tonight, but I think that's worth discussing as well at some point. And having to affix this to the front of the house, I do see that as somewhat of a privacy issue for the homeowner and the renter. But I did want to see if I can get an answer on the commercial areas that short-term rentals would like to be seen according to the ordinance, if possible.
So I don't know, Ron, if you want to answer that question. I'm assuming the reference in the ordinance is to the districts that the code already accepts transient rentals in. So that's the answer. That's the reference in the ordinance is to this map, which corresponds with zoning districts that permit transient rentals.
And those are the green, yellow, and red areas on the map?
Yes, but again, if we can try to hone in on asking these two folks anything more that you want, and anybody else in the room? Or
This is
especially
for Amanda. It's about the regulatory fee. So if some form of this ordinance passes, for example, creating a third licensing class and assigning a license number or a medallion number to it, however, not restricting that nobody else can ever have one, continuing to issue these licenses. Let's say that occurred. Would there be a way that you can implement an additional fee or call it what you want? Is there a word you can come up with that would help us create a fund to help people with affordable housing issues? It could be an emergency rent fund at the lowest level, and it could also subsidize the currently existing down payment fund to help people seriously solve this problem. There already is that fund, but I don't think it's more than $200,000 a year. That's not enough to help many people. But it looks like our market is correcting. We're going to start seeing prices come down a little bit. I think every realtor in this room feels it in our gut. And perhaps ownership under FHA type loans is going to be literally feasible for people again. If we bump up a nice fund to help them with down payment, which is their biggest problem, they're used to paying high payments, they're used to paying high rent. In a way that's kind of good. Now they can afford a mortgage. Can we create a fund to help these people? Now that's going to help. Not limit the people that receive these new 1 to 6 month license medallions. There's no reason to limit it. Encourage it. It's a lot of money you're going to have to help actually solve the problem. You just don't have to cut it off. And by the way, if you do that, within a year, you're going to have some data. You're going to know who's renting because they're going to want to get that medallion. They're going to want to have that license number that Jim can start tracking with his software. So your problem's kind of going to solve itself in a lot of ways. If you implement just common sense, let's create a third licensing category, but let's not shut the gate. There's no reason to. Anyway, thanks.
Good deal. I have a question on the software as it pertains to the workforce. As we know, a large number of the renters here are workforce people. They rent by the bed. there's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. There are 3 separate tenants in one place. Those landlords typically don't rent by the year. They rent in 30-day cycles to those people. There's a lot of turnover. People leave the island. They get here, decide that this isn't for them for whatever reason, whether it be the cost of housing or 50 other reasons it doesn't work for them, and they want to leave. Is the software going to enforce against landlords that are renting to workforce people? Because if they don't have this permit or for whatever reason currently don't qualify, how does the software address putting the workforce out on the street? Because that's my fear. I feel that the bartender, the waitress, they're going to go try to find someone to share rent for them, and they're not going to be able to because the software is going to prevent them from doing that. Has that been addressed?
No.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, we're still in the infancy stage of doing our research on all this. Right now, what the program is, in my opinion, is utilized for is to tell us who's advertising and then do they have the correct license.
I've got a Darren Smith. I own QS Luxury Real Estate. Question for Amanda. Of the licenses that are the non-transient licenses, do you know how many exist in the city today?
Yes, it's a little over 3,100.
3,100? Okay. So of the 3,100, is there any way for your office to know how long they're rented for?
As of today, no. That's why we're addressing this ordinance. Right now, they can rent for the duration of the month or longer. So that's what.
But, well, I'm actually going the other direction. So if someone has a non-transient license, it could be a yearly rental and nobody has any idea. Because the 3,000, whatever that number is, like this big black cloud we keep talking about that we're going to solve. But we don't know how black that cloud is. That it may be 50% 6 to 12 month rentals. But we don't know right now.
That's correct.
Okay. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if this pertains to them, but Sarah Bixby, eXp Realty. So we are talking about how we're in like the infancy stages of this. Why are we rushing a decision on December 6th? That's a big question I think everybody has.
Are you talking about the ordinance?
The ordinance. Mm-hmm.
Well, the commission has given direction to staff. They would like something brought before them to consider. It might not be December 6th. It might be in January.
Yeah, I think it's clear from just this beginning of this meeting that we definitely have more conversation and more data that needs to be gathered by the city.
Hi, good evening. My name's John Holsenbeck, and I think this is on. Can you hear me okay? I'm one of these second home people, and my wife and I, that we just rent a few months seasonally out of the year. And so we've had this transient rental license for, I don't know, several years, 4, 5, 6 years. And other than getting the notice and the bill and the renewal, never gotten any kind of communication. And even these meetings in this ordinance, I found out about it from my neighbor. And so why don't you ask us? You have our addresses, and we'll give you our emails. Us now 3,000 people. I think it was 2,500 before. And then you would know, well, how many of you are renting short-term, long-term, what have you? Because everybody's a little bit different, but I think we do fit in categories, but we're all affected in different ways by this. So, and to us, and since I have the mic, I'll say this. You know, we're also affected by the rising cost of everything else. My tax bill that I just paid, my assessment went from $1 million to $1.8 million since last year. Okay, so we rent seasonally to help offset the cost of the ownership of the house. We don't rent the majority of the year. We use it or it's empty. And so we're kind of in this category where this concept is all these bad Airbnb people with no licenses who are renting my properties and rent every day to different people. I don't think there's probably anybody like that in this room, but this ordinance is going to affect the entire city, which you don't have any data, but in all candor, we're happy to work with you and share that data with you. But I would suggest that some properties, ours included, it's not an affordable house. It's $5,000 or $6,000 a month to own that property. So if you prohibit me from renting, thank you. If you prohibit us from renting, then it will just sit empty, and then it's a burden on my family, which I can use that money to pay my son's med school expenses up at FSU, candidly. So it is very important to us, but we're happy to share that data with you, but we don't even get an email about this ordinance or these meetings or anything else. And when I went online to try to find out about this meeting, it's not even on Legistar that there is a meeting tonight. So I know everybody's trying to do their best job, but the communication has not been very good. It's all, at least from our end, we find out about it from our neighbors and our friends and other people about what's going on, what's the status, have you heard anything? And if we all want to work together and get the best result we can to try to help this crisis, which is not unique to Key West, then we need to be part of the solution and cooperate and communicate with that. Because I think we all generally want the same thing. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm a different kind of renter. I'm Kathleen Gillis, and I have a home with 2 master suites. And if I'm lucky, I rent that room out for 1, 2, or 3 months in the season. I pay taxes to you. How did I learn about this meeting? I got an email from Airbnb. So they were the ones that said, please come and tell them about your experience. I have a home where I don't share my kitchen with my guests. I don't share a TV. They have a bedroom, they have a bathroom, and they have the use of my swimming pool. And that helps me a great deal for my personal expenses. My husband is a realtor as well. My husband also works from home full-time. I work part-time in the community. I am 72. He is 81. That extra money coming into our home is very helpful. And I do pay my taxes on that. And you do know who I am because I do pay those taxes to you on my computer all the time. And those people who stay with me, I've never once had to call the police. I can't say that about the neighbors on either side of me who have teenage children that have parties during the night, or on the other side that they are a family of people in the entertainment business and they don't get home until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And so they have their friends over until 4 o'clock in the morning. And so there are issues, and for us to be put in a box that says we're bad people, that I don't think anybody is addressing the owner-occupied rentals, and that's what I am. No one has ever been in trouble because we are there. And yet we are put in this category that we are taking something away from other people. And I will never rent long-term. I don't want to know about anybody else's personal problems. I just want people to come to Key West. I want them to use all the attractions. I want them to go out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they raise a lot of money for all the businesses that are here.
Yeah, I'm Steve Russ. My wife and I are property owners here in Key West. We're not realtors. We don't rent, but I do have a strong objection to the concept that our property rights should be further restricted to solve a problem that we did not create. And, you know, to the extent that we're building affordable housing, we as property owners are footing part of that bill. And I think we're doing our share. The other question I have is on transient rentals. Are there sunsets on those licenses?
No, there is a sunset on the Truman Annex transient licenses.
How many units are those, please?
300.
300?
And that sunset date is 2025.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
Hey, Katie, Katie, do you mind if I step in here? You've all had great comments, and Jim and Amanda have taken a brunt of a lot of questions that are probably not licensing and code compliance questions. They're here just to answer licensing fees and the new software that we're taking a look at. But if you take a look at the agenda, I think Katie has covered almost all of the items that you've been talking about, but we're getting them out of order, which I think dilutes your comments. So, just as the last comment is, what other solutions should the city pursue with partners to improve the lack of workforce housing? And I think, you're all dotting around those topics, but if we can let Jim and Amanda off the hook and get to Katie's agenda, I think it will really address your issues and give you a chance to communicate and comment on areas that we can all take back and make some decisions on. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I think if we have on Zoom, someone has their hand up, if we can try to pivot to answer that first bullet there, which is about the May 3rd deadline for eligibility, that's in the ordinance. Jason, can you go ahead on Zoom?
They took their hand down after the mayor made her
Then
statement, so maybe that answered her statement.
Folks here in the room, comments on the deadline that says if you had a business tax receipt for short-term rentals as of May 3rd, you get to keep it if you go through a few application processes. But if you didn't have one, then it would be prohibited. Other comments about?
Because for 6 years, I rented my house to locals, and I never raised the rate, ever raised the rent. I moved back in my own house in October, so I let the license lapse, and I renewed it in June, not even knowing about this. So now, after 6 years of renting to locals, now I don't get to have that same license anymore because I let it lapse for six months. I'm with this man here about you get to tell me now the property I've owned for 20 years that I can't really rent for less than 6 months without going through all these hoops and in a medallion when I did rent for 6 years. So I do have a problem with the May 3rd deadline.
I think a show of hands of who has a problem with it, but then, should there be another date in there, or should there be no date? I think that we're trying.
I believe there should never be a date, and maybe we can easily, rather than everybody just say it out loud or talk about it, we could all raise our hands. Do we have a problem with the May 3rd deadline? Everybody can raise their hands. Should be never. And do we want there to be a time period of when you can apply to have these licenses? Is yes or no? The answer for me is no. Everybody say no. And that's all I wanted to say about that.
You would be creating two classes of homeowners. And that is wrong. That's just plain wrong.
Katie, we do have some on Zoom again.
Okay.
Want me to call them?
Put it closer to you.
Well, let.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. Suzanne Washburn. I have a long-term rental condo, and I've always rented to local workforce people. My current tenants have been there. They're going into their 3rd year of occupancy. This passes. I've always had a business license. This passes. They're out. I'm doing vacation rentals because you're going to eliminate a huge number of vacation rentals in this city, monthly vacation rentals. So it's going to put upward pressure on those that have had the license for a long time like me, and you're going to force us into other owners into you got to make more money.
Let's go ahead and hear from some questions or comments on Zoom.
Okay, we have Chrissy Admonson, if you'd like to speak.
Hi, yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding the May 3rd date, my question was that I believe that May 3rd date fails the public notice requirements because what's August 16th, the first reading of this ordinance? So I don't see how we could possibly backdate an ordinance to a date where public notice had not yet been given.
And now,
Other
do
Zoom.
you want to answer that first? Or no? Okay. We have a Jason Boito, if you'd like to speak. Jason, you have to unmute yourself.
I think that's the intent of the workshops, is to be transparent. We have a selection of. So the question was, why was it backdated? I didn't draft the ordinance, so I don't have an answer for that. I mean, there's some staff here from the legal.
That would be me. Ron Ramsing, Chief Assistant City Attorney. So the history here is what I would say at the first workshop. We were directed at the legal department to come up with an ordinance similar to Miami Beach to have one more tool in the toolbox, so to speak, to get some sort of control of the local housing stock. Is it a magic bullet? No. It's going to take a lot more than just this ordinance to right the Titanic, so to speak. To answer your question, is something called the pending ordinance doctrine. So the first time that we talked about this was the May 3rd. That's when we got direction from the City Commission, our department, to look into this and draft it. The first time it was on an agenda was July 6th. That was the first reading, it was postponed. So hopefully that answers your question.
Is it okay for me to ask a question? Lisette, Carrie, my question is, who in this room wants this ordinance at all? Or on Zoom? Just curious. Okay. The only reason I'm asking the question is because the first two questions here on the agenda, like remove or revise May 3rd, should homestead properties, it's hard to ask people to answer that question if they don't want the ordinance at all, I think. But I just wanted to get a pulse of the room and who's on Zoom just to see if that's what the residents of this town are asking for. That's all.
We have been asked if everybody that is going to be asking a question, if you can stand up, please. Once you
Let's
talk.
go back to the May 3rd item. Are there other comments about the May 3rd that haven't already been captured? On Zoom, Jason?
Yeah, we still have Jason Boito on. If you would like to speak, go ahead.
Yeah, so May 3rd, how many homeowners or actually, I should say non-transient rental owners were notified that you were going to have the meeting on May 3rd? And then I also would like to know if when you went in and got your application with the city and submitted it and were approved, why you were never notified about this ordinance and that this may be coming for future reference. There was nothing given to anybody.
More Zoom comments? Okay. Go ahead.
Since nobody in the room agrees with May 3rd being relevant, really I think we need to move on to the fact that if you don't want to throw out the whole idea of the ordinance, there is probably a way you can draft something that will help us go in the right direction. It's kind of a repetition of what I already suggested. Creating your third class of licensing would be a very good result from what began with this ordinance. This gives you a way to gather your data. It also gives everybody enforcement, which will help illegal rentals that are happening not just for less than 30 days, but there's lots of illegal rentals and just bad rentals. So the work that's been done on this does not have to be just thrown out because it doesn't make sense in its entirety to most of us. But you could create the third class. And maybe Amanda is not in a position to answer that question herself, but I'm sure legal and staff can look into how we can monetize it in a way that can create an actual benefit to the people that are at the bottom of the tier and need this affordable housing help. And it's money. Money is the problem. If they made more money, they could pay. If they had some assistance in funds, they can pay. The market is making a correction from what Gregor Apeza stated. What created our problem and exacerbated our problem was the insanity of what happened in the last 2 years with money and the economy. And it's obvious that's changed. So if you start this, you've taken a step. 1 year from now, you will know more than you've ever known. We'll all be in a good position, and we'll see how things are working. Is there a way we can maybe tweak it then and work further towards encouraging landlords to help more long-term people? I myself am leaning a lot towards the nurses in that because I am not able to make a lot of long-term commitments, but I can still help the community with the nurses and the traveling professionals that need housing. So maybe there's ways we can encourage. Once we have this licensing category, you'll have done your job. You won't have wasted all of this effort, and we'll be going in a good direction. And nobody should be restricted. It's
Thank
the
you.
restriction that's the mistake, the
Thank
primary
you.
mistake.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next item just so we can try to get through all this. And assuming the ordinance is moving forward in some iteration, should homesteaded properties be exempt from the provisions of the ordinance? Are there comments or answers to that one?
Well, I have stated I am against this ordinance on property rights grounds, but I will say that during my campaign, I did get an email from somebody who was they had short-term rentals, and they lived in their home. They've been living in their home since 2008, and they bought it at the height of the market. The market crashed, so in order to continue to live down here, they used Airbnb and short-term rentals to pad their budget in order to get by all these years. So absolutely, if this was going to pass in some form, which I hope it doesn't, but if it does, I believe that absolutely homesteaded properties should be exempt, because if homesteaded properties are the ones that are renting, then that means that it's probably an indication that the person renting it really needs that extra income.
Hi, my name is Patricia Nara. In regards to that topic, I own my home here. I was born and raised here. I've never rented my property. I have no intention of renting my property, but I did have the goal in about 5 years, when I don't have to work so hard, that I was going to spend summers in Europe. And I would rent my property for 4 months out of the year. So when I found out about this and the date, I ran over and I applied for a license. But if this passes with that date, I'm not going to get it. And it's not that I have the intention of renting it right now, but in the future when I'm older and I need the income so that I can have the lifestyle that I've worked so hard for, I won't be able to. Yes. And yes, I'm homesteaded. It's my only home, and I live here full time, and I own a business here. Yes.
I'm Roger Gillis. Been here, living here for 19 years. And just a little PS to what Steven said. I think we talked about affordable housing. How about some help for us that have non-affordable houses? You know, things go up, insurance goes up, everything goes up. We need help. And renting out on a 1 month basis to some people during season Helps out a lot, and no one ever thinks about us.
Other answers to that question on homesteaded properties, how they,
Hello, my name is sorry. Hello, my name is Bobby Coe, homeowner, realtor. I know that's a bad word around here, but it seems like we keep having these workshops, and I'm pointing at our elected officials over here because I'm pointing and talking to you. Nobody is happy about this. If you go to Fausto's, guess what people are talking about? You go to Sandy's Cafe, guess what people are talking about? When I show a property, guess who the potential taxpayer is talking about? When I'm selling a property, guess why they're selling the property? They're sick and tired of the city politics. They don't want to do this anymore. We are losing good, hardworking people because we're implementing policies that are crippling people's retirement plans. People work really hard here. Steve and I are fortunate enough. We work very, very hard. I'm still a bartender at Louis' Backyard and probably will be for a very long time until my knees give out. I love this town. I love the weather. I love the people. I'm very, very disappointed with what is happening on that stage up here. And I'm going to point back to the citizens that I keep hearing every single time. Why are we not running for those chairs? Why are we sitting in here complaining to these people? I want to be at dinner right now, but I'm at a short-term vacation rental meeting in a resort town where short-term vacation rentals are a norm. Nobody here wants to be Miami Beach. We don't want to model our policies after Miami Beach. That should not be what the city of Key West goes, oh, Miami Beach is doing this wonderful thing. Let's implement it. It's somewhat ridiculous, guys. Please stop this ordinance. Let the homeowners and the taxpayers of this town have the freedom of property rights. And that's what I think majority of us in this meeting are concerned about. How can I, as a property owner, continue to benefit being a property owner? The city's job, that's our job, not the elected officials over here. This is our job, is to find out how to keep our workforce housing and our workforce here. The city officials should not tell us how to do that.
we're gonna go. So just one more comment in here, and then there's some folks on Zoom waiting.
Okay, Andrew Morawski. I just kind of want clarification on this question of homestead exemption for rentals. As many have stated here, a lot of them are renting to supplement their mortgages when they are not in their house. So how is it that we think that we can make a homestead exemption when we can rent for 6 months in a single year, according to what Jim said, and then not rent for an entire year after that? I mean, there would be, you can't make an exemption for this. As much as I would love to see it, it needs to be more of an incentivization for businesses to buy houses in terms of a homestead for them. So as a business owner, I can go out and buy a property. I'm not getting actual homestead, but a next step up from it. So then I'm not getting killed on taxes. So then I can actually supply workforce housing for it. Because as we all know, the insurances are enough to barely make it affordable for our employees alone by just not by making it affordable there just on those taxes in a single year. So I think when we're talking about a homestead tax exemption for that, it should be more of a incentive for us to, as either business owners or individuals, to purchase a house and then find a way to make sure that we are renting it to a workforce and then getting that exemption from there.
Jason, go ahead on Zoom, folks.
Hi, we have Donna Windle. If you would like to speak, please do. And Donna's gone.
Yeah, hi
oh,
again.
there she
I
is.
have to say, I have worked on and off again since 1970 with affordable housing. There are volumes and volumes and experts, including HUD, FHA, Florida Housing Finance, the National Association of Realtors, the Florida Association of Realtors, who have done extensive research on affordable housing. They know, we all know, this is a science that is very, very long established and very deeply established. Why in the world would we pull something out of thin air and say this is going to make it happen when we've ignored all the things that we know do work? It makes no sense to go forward with this ordinance that somebody else, another community, tried on an experimental basis. And they're in court trying to defend it now. Why would we want to do that as a community? Our community, everybody in this room, I would be willing to bet, and I can see you all on Zoom, are here for two reasons. One, because you are concerned about private property rights. But the other thing you're all really concerned about is the lack of affordable housing. We've all lost friends and family and all kinds of people. Our businesses we like have closed. So we all really are concerned about that. We're really all on the same page with that, but let's get on the same page with finding solutions to the problem. Don't be pulling things out of thin air. That's a stupid approach.
Thank you, Donna.
Folks on Zoom, if you can try to stick to answer the questions on the agenda, we'd appreciate it.
Can you repeat the question again so when we have some on Zoom?
So should homesteaded properties be exempt from the provisions of the ordinance, or should there be an exception for certain classes to rent month to month? Can start to move on to that.
All right, we have Lori, if you would
I
like
know
to
we've already
speak.
heard a couple yeses to that.
Go ahead, Lori.
All right, I'm curious as to why people are asking questions. Jason on Zoom asked a question that nobody really answered, so that makes me a little concerned. Do you not have the answers, or I'm not sure. I can't even believe after the last meeting that May 3rd date is even still in the discussion, because it got a lot of backlash at the last meeting, and the mayor herself said that she didn't think that it was a good idea. I'm also, as far as people being exempt from the provisions, I think this ordinance is trash. I don't think it's going to accomplish what you want it to accomplish. So I don't think the ordinance should go forward as it's written now. Other people have said you guys have a lot of data that you're not looking at. And until you get those details hammered out and look at, there's no reason for a new ordinance. It isn't going to accomplish what you wanted to accomplish. It's going to penalize the people that are in that room that have already spoken. And I'm one of those because I'm a property owner in Key West. I don't see why we're still even talking about pushing this ordinance forward in any way, shape, or form when there's been so much said against it and so much talk about how it's not going to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish anyway.
So I can address that, and the city manager can correct me, but I believe the point of these workshops is to collect public comments so that the city commission can direct staff as to how they want the ordinance to be modified, if they want to modify it.
Yeah. And Katie, I just wanted to add to that too, is we're hosting this second workshop at the request of a commissioner who said that, many people couldn't get here at the time frame that we held the first one, so we wanted to make sure that people that were working have an opportunity to also express their opinions about the ordinance. And that's the reason we're having this second one here, okay?
Other folks on Zoom who are trying to answer.
We have one more. We have Dawn, if you would like to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm here. And I'm going back to the previous person. So we still don't have this May answer. And so I just want, and Mayor Terry was actually part of this whole situation that I was involved in. My buyers purchased after May. I'm a realtor. They purchased after May. They looked at the property after May. And they went under contract and we closed in September. Now, the question is that they asked was, hey, there was an ordinance already on the books that said we couldn't rent this property. We bought this property to do just what we're saying, to stay 3-4 months a year, rent it out the other time. So they said, if that ordinance was there, basically, it wasn't disclosed to us. So now I'm faced with, I don't know how to, we didn't know about this. Like, how do I explain this to him? He actually marched down to City Hall and barged into Terry's office and sat down with them to talk about this. So my question is for anybody who has purchased a property post that ordinance date, and it has not been answered. When we talk about that date, how can you justify that and then know that people bought properties fully intending to rent it without that knowledge or even being discussed until July? So we're looking truly at serious lawsuits against the city if we don't come up with an answer as to why or how you're coming up with that date. Because you didn't disclose it to us, we weren't able to disclose it to other people. So we have an issue here that's very serious that I feel like we've not even, and keeps getting pushed away, is this date. And I know that Greg Oropeza at the last one stood up, and the biggest reason that any of us are here is because of the date. Had you said July, whatever date it was, hey, you guys got 30 days, we would have been able to disclose to our clients. Anybody who wanted to go out and get a rental license could have, which is one of the other issues. Everybody's upset because a couple of 100,000 or maybe even 1,000 people ran out and got licenses. You know what? That's why you give notice, so people can make choices. What you guys gave to us in July was too late. Oh, well, sorry you missed out on that. So our question is, like, how do we deal with that? How can we help our clients and people who purchased?
Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Borlowitz. First of all, thank you for offering this forum. I really appreciate the opportunity. Just wanted to share, I'm a homeowner here in Key West, and I wanted to address the question specifically about exemptions for certain classes like travel nurses or first responders. I also run a large healthcare organization here in town, and I really appreciate that was thought of and identified, and I just wanted to voice my support for that. It would definitely be helpful if we offered exemptions for those classes. And in general, as we're looking at other ways to address our housing crisis, to always be considerate of that. We definitely want to be able to offer those critical services for everyone, and that really helps us. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I think the problem with the agenda and why people keep on skipping around is at the workshop, there were so many great points. And this agenda is written that the ordinance is passing the way it's written. And I feel like we went backwards instead of forwards and using some of those bullet points that we had at the workshop that says, okay, this part of the ordinance isn't going to work. We need to do this. I think that's the problem right now that people are feeling.
Okay, I do believe, can you hear me? I do believe if we've been misunderstood, I apologize for that. This workshop was to hear from those who did not get the opportunity to come to the first workshop. And we need to have some information to send back to the city commissioners, maybe on the 15th, and if we put it on the agenda for December the 6th. And that was an if, okay? So I know we're very passionate about this, and I'm here to hear you, and I think the commissioners are here to hear you, or they wouldn't be here, all right? So please give us the opportunity to go through the agenda and hear it. I mean, so we can hear from you and then move forward. I don't have all the answers tonight. I can tell you that right now. This was not for me to give you solid answers. Katie doesn't have the answers tonight. We want to hear from you, and we want to move forward. Okay? Thank you.
Mine's on point. It's worded, should there be an exception to permit monthly rental to certain classes, and this is directed to the city attorney. He's the only person I think they probably could answer this for the city. Can the city do this? Can the city create a protected class? Does that not conflict with federal housing laws? It's a question. I don't know that we have the ability to even discuss this line item, because I'm not an attorney, but I don't know of any government agency that can create a protected class besides the federal government.
Ron, do you want to answer that, or are we going to answer that later?
The only thing I'll say is that, you know, under the city charter, our office is responsible to give legal advice to the city commission and the city departments. So although I do have an opinion on that, I do not give legal advice, with all due respect to everybody here, to the general public. That is against the city charter. So I hope you can respect that answer.
Let's move on. Should these licenses be transferable? If yes, what requirements or fees should apply? So this is written into the ordinance right now that that the licenses would be able to be transferred, similar to the way that transient licenses can be bought and sold. Talking about the proposed draft short-term rental ordinance that's proposing that short-term rental licenses would also be able to be transferred, so bought and sold between properties. So we're asking whether that provision is something that's supported here or not.
My question is, if most of these properties were purchased over $1 million, that means that their carrying costs are over $7,000 a month.
Bring the microphone up to you.
How does a property that costs $7,000 a month become affordable housing? Where's the math? We haven't seen one example of how that plays out, not one.
Shows on the people that already bought a long time ago. I think it comes back to what I said. They're forcing it onto the people that have bought 20 or 30 years ago that paid $200,000 or $300,000. They're going to force us to try to rent to those people.
Go ahead, and then we'll go up to you.
Hi, I'm John Holzenbach. Two things I want to back up about their classes of people exemption. I think the point there is, if a house isn't suitable for affordable housing, should they be allowed to apply for an exemption? Because it's not a suitable house, so why should they be bound by having to go through this process or get a license, or they missed it and it's too late, what have you? And the second point on the exceptions would be, if you're just renting your property for a few months out of the year and the majority of the year you're using it, should there be an exemption for that as well? And as to the assignment, and maybe this is a question for Ron, but it's not legal advice, Ron, is I'm not clear in reading the ordinance whether it's a grandfathering type of, if you sell your property, is that license lost? Or can the new owner get that license? I know the ordinance talks about transferring it to an area where there's transient licenses permitted, but that makes no sense because they can get a transient license. So why would they want this short-term rental license?
So that's also one of the questions is, should the city pursue other ways to minimize short-term rental licenses, such as termination upon sale?
It seems to me like the city's goal here is obviously to minimize the amount of short-term rental licensing that exists within the city of Key West. If there is a medallion system, which I don't like medallion systems. I mean, you know, liquor licenses, I'm very familiar with those. They're very expensive, and it can actually, if it becomes scarce, that's something that could really increase the price of getting into such a system. The taxi medallion system down here for a very long time was one good example of that. It was very anti-competitive up to the Uber and Lyft state level ordinances. So what I'm seeing here is if there is no medallion system, if I'm correct on this, then what is currently existing will eventually deplete over time unless it gets passed down through trust or something. It's not exactly clear to me. So that is a concern. And to the last point of should we have exemptions for certain classes of workers, police, traveling nurses, those types of things. If we're talking about exemptions, we're talking about a market for something that we want to keep low because it does serve a purpose in the community. It keeps people employed. So what I'm getting at here is the idea of a pool that dries up over time, or even a pool that gets more expensive over time with medallions, is going to increase the costs of these rentals. I think it's actually going to make things potentially more expensive. I just have concerns with that. I have concerns this is eventually going to make things scarcer for these licenses or make them more expensive, which could have some trickle-down effects on renters. Thanks.
Other comments on whether the licenses should be transferable? And if they are, okay, on Zoom?
We have one on Zoom, JBC, if you would like to make a comment on this item. Okay.
Should the city pursue other ways to minimize
Sorry, I
licenses?
did have a
Okay, go ahead.
or comment. It says, it leads me to believe, I just want to make sure that I'm clear, that you're talking about making these have a price tag just like the transient licenses. So transient licenses cost $250,000 right now, or really probably more than that. That's what we're talking about. And that question, that's what you're asking, right?
Well, as drafted, I
Right.
think once they're able to be transferred and once there's a limit on new ones, I would just assume that they would become a commodity that's starts to function the way the medallion system does.
Right,
Sorry.
that's what I just wanted to be sure, because I didn't know if you were trying to say that if I owned a house and I had a license, but I sold the house, is it transferable to the buyer, the new buyer? I didn't know if you meant that or if you meant as if they were transient licenses.
I think both are up for discussion.
Right. I don't like either one.
Okay.
Just saying.
I think JBC unmuted if they want to go ahead and speak.
Thank you. I'm one of those second homeowners who purchased at a time when property values were based upon the ability to rent monthly. I'm someone who's been coming down to Key West since 1976. It's kind of been a lifelong dream to live down there. And I think, like the vast majority of people who actually live in Key West, they're not true conks. They kind of made a transition. And I think it's important to consider that some people may have a period of transition where they need to rent for a period of time before they're actively down there all the time or the vast majority of the year. So that's something to consider. In terms of the legality of the May 3 date, which has been discussed a number of times, and Mr. Ramsing really hasn't answered the question yet. And I've spoken to him about this. I am an attorney. I've been involved in litigation for 30 years, and I can tell you that there is literally 0% chance that the city will be able to enforce that May 3 date. That is just not going to hold. So ultimately, if the city wants to end up with a $250 million lawsuit, which will bankrupt the city, and the state of Florida will come in, and then unfortunately for everyone, which I don't think anyone wants, we'll end up with daily rentals everywhere. That's the result that you're going to get if you use the May 3 date, because it's just not legally supportable. It's not morally supportable, and it's not legally supportable. So I really think the city and the commissioner should consider strongly pushing the date back at the very least. I mean, I don't think ultimately that any of this is going to effectuate the purpose that's the stated purpose in terms of affordable housing, but from a legal standpoint, it's a disaster for the city of Key West to try to go back retroactively. So appreciate the time.
So there's a few more folks on Zoom, and then we'll come over here.
I have one more. Paul Hayes, if you'd like to speak, please do.
Regarding the transferability of the licenses, I think the city is not taking into account the fact that the people that come here and stay for a month do not want to be on Duval Street. They come here for the peace and quiet that every other homeowner does. So having the monthlies transferred over to the district, which has almost no stock available to start with, because they've all converted to transient licenses. It's not going to be profitable for a homeowner to pay to transfer a license downtown. They would be better off looking for that transient license. So, and the homeowners that rent on a monthly basis do not want to live on Duval Street.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? Okay, go ahead.
I just think that, oh, you guys can see me sitting down probably. As far as the transferability, I guess I just feel like it speaks to the fairness issue, especially if we're using the May 3rd date, so that all of us that did not have a license prior to that date, and then all of a sudden, and I'm a real estate agent, your neighbor's property that was doing the renting is worth more than your property is, and it becomes this commodity that they're talking about. And I just don't think that that's fair. You're penalizing the people that weren't doing what you're trying to fix.
Hi, my name is Andrea the Greek, Andrea Whites. I'm a realtor. I worked in Key West for 25 years as a bartender, doing double shifts as a single woman so that I could afford to buy my house in 1974. I am an advocate for property rights and always have been, knee-jerk liberal through and through. And I think that this ordinance in any way, shape, or form is insulting to us as property owners. I remember at the last meeting, a local person said, well, put it on one of the voting agendas and let the locals vote for it, which would preclude all of the property owners that do not live and vote in Key West. So that's not fair either. When I came from New York City, we had rent control there, and I know that's never going to happen. I believe it's illegal now. I don't really know. But to this date, homeowners and renters can charge whatever they want for their rent. So if you try to put all these different things into a mold that you have created, it will potentially upset the real estate market, and it will create gross imbalances in people. I am homesteaded at my home, and I always had a roommate. I had to have a roommate because I did not have a second wage earner. I'm the kind of enabler that I cooked for them, I washed their clothes, I fed them, I got their beer for them. It was horrible. So then I said, what happens if I walled off one of the bedrooms in my house, and then I get to be the landlady and not the slave that does too much for everybody? So I fall into this kind of weird gray zone. And back when, Christ, it had to be 25 years ago, I remember hearing at a city commission meeting, we're never going to raise your property taxes. And I looked at that statement and I said, well, it's time to have an alternative means of doing things, because whenever a flat out statement of that comes up, it never happens. And so I was just absolutely impossible for me to be pushed out of Key West because of my economic status. And I believe very strongly that this entire ordinance should be crumpled up and thrown out, with apologies from the city commission for even considering it.
Hi, I wanted to talk on this, but I didn't want to get off subject for you. But I'm a property owner here since mid-'80s. I have 10 properties and over 20 units that I rent yearly as affordable housing to people that work here. And I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem of this. And I don't think this ordinance has anything to do with the solutions. The one lady really hit it on the head a while ago about if it goes through, then I'm sitting with 24 license. So what am I going to do? I'm going to be forced to get into that program. This is my 401k. You know, this is what I did rather than put it in the market as I bought Key West Dirt. And I want to see this work, and I don't think this is a solution. I think we need a separate workshops to go. I know Jimmy Weekly's been working on affordable housing since I first came here, and it's a tough one. But there are a lot of people like myself that want to do this. And I also want to be able to have, I've got one property that is suitable for a monthly rental. And I love the fact that my friends, the grandma and grandpa, come down and rent for a month. They bring a different set of kids in every week. They love Key West, and that's something we don't want to deny them. But I think if you appeal to the motives of some of the property owners that would help, we could help with this affordable housing.
Thank you.
But the ordinance is not the solution.
So we talked a little bit already about displeasure with city communication. How should the city communicate these regulations or regulations going forward with locals and out-of-town property owners? What's the best way to better communicate? Mail, email, newspaper ads, Jordan. Facebook, 60 days notice.
All of it. You've got a mailing address for every property in the city.
Snail mail to every.
I mean, you got a mailing address for every single property in the city that this would that this ordinance would affect. I mean, that's one way to send out a notice. I mean, I'd like to back up to one thing since I got the mic now. The exceptions for certain classes. You know, he mentioned, Philip up there mentioned that you know, how do you create a protected class? To my knowledge, a nurse or first responder are not technically protected classes, but who's the onus going to be on to determine whether the prospective tenant belongs to that class, and how are you guys going to enforce that?
So I'm going to leave that open-ended because don't have the answers to all these questions. Other solutions the city should pursue to improve the lack of workforce housing. And we're going to wrap up in about 5 minutes and turn it over to any elected officials who want to make closing comments. Over there. And then.
Hello, again, Bobby Coe. This is pretty much the only thing the cities are allowed to do is zoning. So you, just like we have the green and the yellow and the pink zoning for transient, you now create an area inside the city of Key West that is zoned for workforce housing. And in that way, you eliminate the height limit that the city has imposed on. So that way a developer can come into the city, build a Category 5 high-tech apartment building that are workforce housing, which is very much like the children. Steve and I, we lived in workforce housing thanks to Joe and Winnie that gave us a job at Fogarty's, gave us $1,000 a month for a room. If we didn't have that leg up, we wouldn't be sitting here. We'd be gone. So we do need this opportunity. But that house that Joe and Winnie let us rent is worth $2 million now. If I listed it, it'd probably be worth $3 million. But in all seriousness, though, it's time for the city to put on its big boy pants, big girl pants, and really dig into this problem, which is zoning, not hindering the rights of our owner rights of our real estate.
Other solutions the city should pursue. Go ahead.
I guess I could stand up. Hi there. I came to the first workshop. I didn't chat. I let some far more eloquent people do that for me. I'd had 18 pages that I'd written coming into that meeting. I redacted it down to 12. thought I was doing pretty good with that, and most of the points were picked up on in that meeting, and they were awesome. And I hope that the people who have brought this ordinance forward were paying attention to that. Read the room. It's it's pretty one-sided. The fact that this was brought forward in the first place seems to have been, I think, believed it was sponsored by Commissioner Kaufman, and that. Okay, but okay. Right. So, but one of the points that was brought up then was that he'd had an employee that was critical to his business that was finding it difficult to find housing down here. My 18 pages is down to 3 little notes. This town 32 years ago I came here. I was 22 years old. I'm 53 now. It was a hellhole. Everything was falling apart. It was all rotted out, and just it was a disaster. It had had years and years of neglect, and in that 32 years, billions of dollars have been spent redoing all the waterfront, redoing all of these houses. The city commission, even Hark, even used to have like a shit list of all the houses that it just didn't like, and they weren't pretty. Well, now all these people have come in and they've made them all pretty, and they've spent millions collectively doing that. And that money is not just a straight up and down line. It goes laterally too, straight into the community. The carpenters, the plumbers, the electricians, all of these people have taken, and that's how an economy works. All of these people, and even these houses now, these ones, I don't have a rental house, but I'll be damned if you're going to tell me after 25 years of owning my home that the guy behind me just bought his and he can do it, and after 30 years living here, I can't. Screw that, That's
We appreciate that.
I've got an 87-year-old mother, and if I have to leave the community, don't try to shut me down. If I have to leave the community to go and look after her and nurse her, I call my house my pet dragon. It's literally, I can constantly putting money into a furnace. My wind insurance is 15 grand a year. My electricity bill was 1,100 for the last 3 months. Forget the taxes, forget everything else, forget the mortgage. It all adds up. It's like this gentleman said over here. What about the assistance for the people who can't afford to live in their homes anymore? I used to be able to afford to live in my home, and I can't anymore. But all that money goes laterally. Some of these houses that we're talking about here are some of the best maintained homes on the island. And all of those people, there's pool people, there's landscaping people, they're all getting a livable wage. And they're probably getting a better wage than most just because of the nature of those homes. I think some of the examples we used were Miami Beach. He brought that up as well. Miami Beach is a hellhole. Has anyone been there lately? It used to be like the cool place to be. It's bloody awful now, It's a ton of crime, and that's going backwards, that place. And if the design of this ordinance is to collapse the price of houses to make them affordable, really? I'm going to take that one on the chin? I don't think so, I think this is ridiculous. The way this agenda's been written, it suggests that this whole thing's just going forward. All of the language in here.
I said earlier.
I pick up on the language last meeting as well.
I think I said earlier.
Modifications was
you didn't say.
Modifications was the word that was used.
All right.
That would suggest that this is already sort of a factual kind of thing in the minds of the people who've presented it, to the people.
I do believe I said earlier that what the reason for this workshop was. And I appreciate your comments, but we do have to move on and allow our elected officials to have something to say. Okay?
Can I ask one quick question? Probably to legal. So there was someone on Zoom, and he was an attorney, and he was talking about the state coming in if there were lawsuits and this and that. And I'm not familiar. I'm a realtor. I'm not an attorney. I try and learn as much as I can from you guys. But so the question is, if this was written, like if this was passed and it had enough problems that the state really said, okay, forget it, is it possible legally for them to come in, get rid of all of our rental laws, and make every house on the island a nightly rental? Is that actually a possibility? But I mean, we have something called a carve-out as it stands, correct? So we have a carve out from state law right now that we can blow if we do things wrong.
The current exemption that we have is for transient rentals, 30 days or less, under state law. The state does not regulate more than 30 days. The state can always preempt. I mean, we've seen that locally for years now. They can always preempt. I can't speak for the state.
I just wanted to ask that question.
But the
just because
carve-out
if
is
we-
for 30 days or less.
So if we do pass stuff that doesn't really pass the muster with them, and because this workshop anyway mentioned the short-term rentals. I just wanted to clarify that because I
No.
never really understood the carve out
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah,
and
that's
their
for
power.
transient. That's for transient. And Mr. Pope, who is on the tree commission, I advise the tree commission, and out of courtesy to him, the way it works is this ordinance was written and advertised and on an agenda, and it could only change through input like this at the city commission, or a city commissioner proposes it. So nobody's trying to ignore or pull a fast one or be shady. That's just how it works. We write an ordinance, it gets noticed, and if there are any changes, they're done in open meetings, city commission meetings. And how we get to that point is take input from you folks. So I hope that answers your question and alleviates any concern that somehow we completely ignored the first workshop. That's not happening.
Thank you, Ron. We're going to have,
I
Jim?
really didn't want to come back up here, but I have to correct the statement I made earlier, referenced the homestead exemption. Apparently, the state changed the law where they consider abandonment of your homesteaded property if you rent for 30 days or more in a 2-year consecutive period. So, Suzanne, you were right. I was wrong.
all right. Well, thank you. I do want to say thank you for your honesty, your passion, and all your questions tonight. We have made notes, about 3 or 4 pages of your questions and your comments. We will put those back together. We'll give them to the commission. We'll have more and more discussions, I'm sure. And I want to turn this over first to Mayor Terry Johnston, if you have something to say. Sure.
Yeah, I do.
First of all, thank you all for coming out again. And our intention this time really was to reach a different audience than what we did the first time. Because it was Commissioner Kaufman said that, look, there's several people that work and couldn't get there. Let's get the opinions and the input from the people that could not get here to the first workshop. So that's why we're here again tonight. And I know there's some of you out here that are repeat offenders that were here at the first workshop and came back again to give more comments. Let me address just a couple items. The reason, and I will say this personally from my vantage point as a mayor, the reason that we requested legal to write up an ordinance was to attempt to generate more long-term rentals in our market at a price point where really our labor force can rent. That was the intent from my vantage point of asking legal to write an ordinance. Second of all, is it a done deal? No, it's not. That's why we're sitting in the room. That's why we sat in the room last time, to get input. Because if the ordinance does not achieve what we're trying to do, which is to generate more long-term rentals for our workforce, then we don't need the ordinance. We have heard the unintended consequences. Believe me, we've got those down. We've written them. Katie has a tablet of unintended consequences. So if the ordinance doesn't achieve what we're looking for, which is really to generate more long-term rentals for our workforce, then nobody's going to shove it down your throat, really. And I would say the reason that we're doing this is we've had a request to bring this back, the ordinance back, at our December 6th meeting. I would encourage you all to show up at the December 6th meeting because we will continue to garner input. But if this ordinance doesn't do what we intend it to do, then no, there's no reason to bring it forward. If we can tweak some areas and have it be a viable ordinance to achieve our goals, then yes, we would like to do that. We've spent, legal has certainly spent some time on it, but no, nobody's going to shove this down your throat. And we did discuss the May 3rd date. We discussed it last time. We discussed it at the commission meeting on the dais, And the May 3rd date was the first time that the city attorney mentioned the ordinance during city attorney comments. We also, at the subsequent meeting, talked about this May 3rd date, and could it change? I mean, is it carved in granite? And the answer was yes. You know, it can change if we go forward with the ordinance. But please, you know, let me assure you that if the ordinance doesn't do what we intended to do, then nobody is going to shove it down your throats, okay? So I just wanted you to give me that viewpoint from me as the mayor. So, and I encourage the other city commissioners to, would you like to comment on it?
I've got-
Sam or Jimmy or Lisette?
I've got Lisette right up here, Mayor.
Lisette, okay. All right, Lisette?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just wanted to thank you all for being here. And I think it's very important to make the point that we are here to serve the will of the people. So speak to your commissioners and ask them, if you want them to vote against this, ask them to do so. We answer to you. So I just wanted to make that statement, and thank you guys for being here.
Believe Commissioner Lopez is on.
I am. Yeah, I just wanted to once again, as my colleagues, including my new colleague, have said, just thanking everybody for coming out. And this is really a fruitful conversation, but I want to make sure and that people know that that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what our intent is to have a conversation around trying to solve an issue that I think that we all agree is an issue. So we're just trying to get to that point, and nobody's trying to shove anything, as the mayor's already made, I think, about as clear as it can be, that we just want to try and get to the end result of solving a problem that we've had for a long time. And if that solution is to abandon this effort, then so be it. But one way or the other, we do need to get together and work together on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hoover?
Yes, thank you, Patty, and thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. This is an issue that I'm passionate about, but not from the standpoint of making you all unhappy. It's more from a standpoint of addressing this issue, which we all know is a huge issue in our community, and that is affordable workforce housing. I've been working on this since I came on the commission. I will continue to do that. Your input on this particular side of what we could possibly do has been invaluable, and it will be taken in and it will be discussed amongst our city staff, including legal and city management, and we will decide what's the next best course of action for us. But without your input, we would never get there. So I applaud you for showing up. I applaud your passion because I feel the same way about certain issues. But trust that we are looking for the best possible solutions for our community. And they include things that were not necessarily brought up here tonight. And that is, people whose neighborhoods have been disrupted by these short-term rentals. So we still have that issue, and we still need to get to the bottom of that. And that's what I'm going to work toward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Weekly?
Yeah, I would like to thank everyone for coming also. I was unable to attend the first meeting, and I was reading the notes from that meeting. And one of the reasons that this came forward is because of BPAS units. We're limited to the number that we have left, and we know that we have a housing crisis in this community, workforce housing crisis in the community. And we were looking at ways that maybe, since we can't build anymore, that there's ways in which we can take existing housing and encourage people to use it for the workforce. I'm hearing what everyone here says this evening. A lot of it I agree with, a lot of it I don't. The one thing I do agree with is the gentleman that mentioned Fausto's, and I appreciate that. Because every business in this community is dealing with this crisis of housing. The city, All the government agencies are as well. But you know what? It's been mentioned so often. This is not anything that we have voted on. This is only something that came before the commission. We postponed it to have public input from everyone on either side of the issue that you may sit on. And I think it's appropriate for us to have this second one. And I would imagine, I can't speak for anybody but myself, but I would imagine that at the next commission meeting, when this does come up, we probably will give direction to the attorney's office to look at the ordinance again and see if there's a different angle that we can take to maybe achieve the housing that we're looking to get for the workforce in this community. Look, it was mentioned that since I've been on the commission since 1985, this is the primary issue that I've worked on. We've made some steps, but the state keeps coming in and interfering with us trying to do anything. You know, they have hurricane evacuation, they have, area critical state concern, whatever. So they've limited our ability to be able to provide housing to those in the community that truly need it. And we have to always remember that. It's going to be an ongoing challenge. It's been stated by the Housing Authority and the former director of the Housing Authority, and we will never build our way out of this problem. It's an issue that we have to understand is going to be with us for years and probably generations to come. So we just have to be cognizant of that and work at ways and look at ways in which we can provide housing for our workforce one step at a time. And I think all of you understand that as well, because I'm sure you have clients that come to you saying, look, this is what I can afford. Can you help me find something? Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no. But you know what? It's the challenge that we face, and it's a challenge that we have to accept and trying to resolve that challenge. So again, I appreciate everyone coming here this evening, and the input, to me anyway, was very helpful in what I may bring forward to the commission about trying to rewrite the ordinance with input from everyone that's involved. So thank you all again.
Commissioner Kaufman?
Thank you. So I'm a little bit surprised that I didn't hear one person speak in favor of the ordinance, and it is disappointing to me because we have a lot of single mothers without places to live right now. You know, we get calls in the agency that I'm involved with, and there's no place for people to go. It's really desperate right now. It's desperate out there. Okay? This has never been that way. There's always been a place for people to go. There's no place for people to go. It's emotional. We get the phone calls, okay? And when there's no place for people to go, it's never happened before. We've always had Catholic Charities, Samuel's House, FKOC, places to go where working people, okay, their landlord is selling the house and they have no place to go. And there's no vacancies anywhere on the island, okay? So let me just finish, okay? I listened for 2 hours, okay? Let me
Commissioner
finish.
Kaufman finish, please.
Yeah, let me finish. So we started this process because you may remember on the front page of the Citizen, there was the map of the Airbnbs. And we received complaints. We've received lots of people telling the commission, this is unacceptable with the thousands of Airbnbs that it looked like on the map. Now, maybe that's not accurate. I don't know. But the point of the ordinance, to get to your question, was to limit the proliferation, to limit the increase of the vacation rentals. Not to make those houses that you have now that are vacation rentals or what exists now to change them. But the issue is, in my neighborhood, for example, I live on a street with 6 houses, okay? And some of them are chopped up. But every single person living there is a working person in the city of Key West. And the question is, will our neighborhoods transform? Now, it may not, because the market is changed, right? During COVID, we saw this crazy uptick in the monthly rentals, right? You saw that on the island, but that's cooled off. So maybe for now, we don't have that problem, right? Everyone, I see people nodding their heads, right? So thank goodness for that. But the issue really is, what do we want to see the future of our island to be? Do we want to have more vacation rentals or not? And listen, I don't know what the future is for this ordinance, but we do have to get serious about this. And it's about supply and demand. We all know it's about supply and demand, and we don't have the supply. We have the demand, but we don't have the supply. So what do we need to do? We need to think this through. We have to be smart in our decisions. And if we do pass this ordinance, we got to consider the homestead exemptions for sure. We need the essential workers. But what else we need to do? We need to go to the state. We need to ask for those 900 ROGOs. Those 900 ROGOs, 300 from Isla Mirada, they lost them. The 300 from Marathon, and the 300 from the county when they rejected those. We need to take those 900 ROGOs, and we need to do some real stuff here in the city. And we could build up, we can allocate ROGOs all the way up to mile marker 26 in our ordinances. But so the point of that I'm trying to make is that in our neighborhoods, and I appreciate being here for the first time with our Commissioner District 4 representative. Thank you for being here. It's going to be a pleasure working with you, I know. But what Commissioner Hoover said about how these vacation rentals disrupt neighborhoods, I think we have to also consider that as well, because we hear from constituents about that as well. So anyway, we need to focus on the supply, retain the supply that we have, and that was the purpose. That's why the entire commission gave direction to City Legal to prepare that ordinance. So we're keeping an open mind. Thank you for your comments, and I hope you can appreciate my point of view.
Thank you, Commissioner. Again, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. I think we've all listened about your passion and what you want to see. I know all of the commissioners here and the mayor have taken notes, and we'll take it back and at this point do a summary and go from there. Is this the last workshop? I don't know. We'll get direction. I will get direction from this, and legal will get direction from the city commission within the next, I'm sure, month, and we'll be able to give that information out. Thank you.